Hi, today we're going to talk about the unit circle and how we can relate it to trigonometric functions. The unit circle is a circle of radius 1, and it has the equation x squared plus y squared equals 1. At least that's the simplest equation for it. Now, we know that the circumference of a circle is equal to 2 pi r, but in the unit circle the radius is 1, so the circumference of a unit circle is 2 pi. Now this is going to help us when we define the trigonometric functions. Before we start defining the trigonometric functions using the unit circle, we're going to define the central angle to be t radians. Now you remember that you've learned already that the arc length, the length of any intercepted arc here, is equal to r times theta. But in the unit circle, we have that r is equal to 1, and we're defining theta, the angle, to be t. So we have that s is equal to t. All right? So in a unit circle, now this is not any circle, but in a unit circle, the radian measure of the central angle is equal to the length of the intercepted arc. Now one thing I want to point out is that t can be any real number. You can go around this circle in either direction, positive or negative direction, and you can go around it as many times as you want. So we can define the trig functions using this because t is any real number. Now, what you've already done in trig is you have defined for general angles, we defined the sine of theta to be value y over r, and the cosine of theta to be x over r. But in a unit circle, r is equal to 1, and that's one of the nice things about it. It makes it so useful. So r is equal to 1, and now we can define the sine of t to just be the value y, and the cosine of t to be the value x. Now remember, this is just on the unit circle. This is not for anything. Okay, so now we're able to define all 6 of the trigonometric functions using the unit circle. We have for any real number t, now remember it can be positive, it can be negative, it can be 0, and a point p, x, y that corresponds to this real number t, we define our 6 trigonometric functions as the sine of t is equal to y, the cosine of t is equal to x, the tangent of t is equal to y over x, but x cannot be 0, and then we have the reciprocal functions. Cosecant of t is 1 over y not 0, the secant of t is 1 over x, it's the reciprocal, x not equal to 0, and the cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, x over y, with y not equal to 0. So you need to learn these 6 trigonometric functions as we proceed through the next examples. Now let's do an example. We're going to find the values of the trigonometric functions for t with a point negative 3/5, 4/5, which is on the unit circle. That's what's nice about the unit circle. It makes defining these functions very simple. We can write that the sine of t, now remember we define the sine of t to be the value of y, so the sine of t is equal to 4/5. We define the cosine of t to be x, so the cosine of t is negative 3/5. The tangent is defined as y over x. So that's, and you might remember that sine over cosine, same thing. And then that would reduce to negative 4/3. And then you can find the reciprocal functions using the definitions. Anytime you're working with functions, you need to understand and be aware of what the domain and range of the function is. We define the sine of t to be y, and we have already talked about the fact that t can be any real number. You can go around the unit circle, you can go around in positive direction, negative direction, so t can be any real number. So the domain, which is the input for a function, that's what you can put into the function, is any real number. So the domain here is going to be all reals, which we will just designate with the interval notation negative infinity to infinity, but that's all reals. Now the range of a function, that's what comes out of the function. That's the number that the function can actually equal. And if you look at the unit circle, and in general this is true for all sines and cosine functions, the value that the sine function is going to take on, the value that you put a number in, you take the sine, you get a number out, that number is always going to be between 1 and -1. So the range of the sine function is the interval -1 to 1. And the same is going to be true for the cosine function. So the domain for the sine and the cosine function is all reals. The range for the sine and the cosine function is always between -1 and 1, inclusive.